Okay, so today we're going to talk about some holding tank basics. You know, there's a lot of new people that recently got into the RV market, and that's really good, but I've seen a lot of the same questions on some of the Facebook forums and Facebook groups that I'm in, and some of the online forums. So I thought I would just throw some information out there about how to manage your holding tanks, what to look for, a couple tips and tricks to make it a lot easier when dumping your holding tanks, because the last thing you want to do is fill up your gray tank and overflow your shower, or worse, fill up your black tank and overflow your toilet into your brand new RV. So let me take you inside, and we're going to start at the control panel, and we're going to kind of introduce you to what you should look for and how to manage your RV's holding tanks. Okay, so here we are at your inside control panel. Every RV has an inside control panel. It tells you a lot of stuff. It tells you the condition of your batteries, okay, and then it tells you how many holding tanks you have, and it tells you your holding tank levels. Now, the level indicators are virtually never accurate unless you have a brand new RV. They always get gummed up, and they never give you an accurate reading. If yours do, wow, you're lucky. I did do a video on how to tell when your black tank is full, and I'm going to put a card to that in the upper right hand corner. I encourage you to go over and check that out. That'll tell you without fail when your black tank is full. That's pretty important. But you need to know, and you need to learn how many holding tanks your RV has. Mine has 4. It has a freshwater tank, black water tank, and 2 gray water tanks. Freshwater tank is pretty self-explanatory. That's fresh water. We usually travel with, I don't know, 10 or 12 gallons of water in the freshwater tank, just in case we want to stop at a rest area or we want to stop beside the road. I can flip the water pump on, which is that one. I can flip the water pump on, and then we can use our own bathroom, and we can use our own sinks and stuff. That's pretty nice. The black tank, you know what that is. That's the bathroom. We have 2 gray tanks. Now, notice the orientation. It's black, gray 1, gray 2. The black is the toilet, the gray 1 is the shower and the sink in the bathroom, and the gray 2 just happens to be the kitchen galley tank. It's pretty easy to experiment with these. If you're on a full hookup site, you can open one and run some water and see which is gray 1 and which is gray 2. Only do that if you have hooked up to a full hookup site. Somebody's not going to be very happy with you if you're just letting your gray water tanks go out on the grass. But I encourage you to experiment and see which one's gray 2. On mine, gray 1 is the shower, gray 2 is the kitchen. Yours could be reversed. So you need to know which one is which, especially when it comes time to empty that tank. So now let's go outside and we'll check out our drain hoses, and we'll check out our outside valves. Okay, we were just inside at the control panel, and now we're outside taking a look at my setup. My tanks come out just under my hot water heater, and there's 3 valves. They're all the way under this side, but they have it noted, and these weren't like this. I had to put these on here after I figured out which valve was which. But if you remember from inside on my control panel, it goes fresh, black, gray 1, gray 2. Now, what I've done is I figured out which one is the black, and I labeled these with a label maker, and these have been on here for 6 years, and the rain, the wind, the snow, the sleet, and the hail, everything. And this happens to be the same orientation from inside on the control panel. Here's my black tank. That's gray tank 1. That's the shower. That's gray tank 2. It's perfectly okay to keep your gray tank open. Each gray tank is perfectly okay to keep those open, but you never ever want to keep the black tank open ever, because if you do, you run the risk of forming the dreaded poo pyramid, and when you get that, it's going to be really hard to get out. So keep your black tank open, determine when you need to flush it and when you don't need to flush it. A day or so before you flush the black tank, close your gray tanks. That way it'll accumulate half a tank of gray when you flush your black tank, then you can clean it out and flush it with your gray tanks, and it'll be nice and clean and fresh. Let's go on and check some other stuff out. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you get to a full hookup site is you want to hook up your sewer hose. Notice that I have the little sewer hose stand, okay, the little slinky supporter, and it's lower on that end, and it's higher on this end. This gives you that sloping effect to let your holding tanks drain out completely. Now, be careful where you park, because if you only have one section of sewer hose, it may not be long enough to stretch all the way over to the sewer connection. That's why I have the Camco Rhino set up, and it's got a 10-foot extension, and it joins right in the middle. Another little tip is, if you have these things accordion, okay, and you can adjust these as you see fit. What I like to do is about 2 or 3 inches from the end, I crunch it all up so everything's nice and smooth when it's going through the transition, and everything's nice and smooth when it's coming out of the transition. That makes everything flow down the pipe better. Also, here's another tip. When you're hooking up your sewer hose, see if you can get as straight of a run as possible. This is a nice straight run. Everything's going to come right down the pipe. Everything's going to go into the septic tank, and then, you know, I use my shower tank to drain out and wash out after I flush my black tank. And everything on a nice straight run, it's going to drain a lot easier. It's going to keep your holding tank hoses, or your sewer hoses, a lot cleaner. Let's go check out a couple more that I found and see what those guys do. Okay, so here's my neighbor on one side. You can see his is pretty straight. He's pretty stationary, so he's got his tied down. It's pretty straight. It kind of meanders on in there, and then he's got it connected up under there. But that's gonna be not bad. Mine's a little straighter. It's gonna drain a little bit easier. But this is my neighbor on one side. He's got the right idea. He also has it supported with some pieces of wood, and like I say, he's pretty stationary. He's got supported with some pieces of wood, and then he's got the little slinky stand over there supporting the sewer hose. But he's on a nice incline. Everything's going to drain out pretty well for him. He's just got a couple of kinks. Let's go check out now an example of what you should not do. Okay, here's my neighbor on the other side. His looks like a coiled up snake. His comes out of the drain, and it comes up, and it goes around and around and around and around, and it goes on a pretty good turn here, and another pretty good turn, and then it hooks up to the RV. He's pretty stationary too, but what I think is, he's only got one section of sewer drain hose, and it's kind of too long for where he parked. He's pretty darn close to where his outlet is. So he could either move his RV back or forward a little bit, or he could really adjust the position of the outlet to face this way instead of that way, and then he could scrunch up his sewer hose, and he could make it a little bit shorter, and it would be a straighter run. But that's probably an example of how you should not do it. That just doesn't look like it's going to drain very smoothly, and that's going to leave you with a dirty hose. And the last thing you want to do is have to wash out your hose after you dump your black tank. So let's go back over to mine, and I'll show you a couple more things. Okay, another item that you really need is you really need a section of clear hose. And all this does is got these little blade connectors. All it does is it twists on, and it lets you see what's coming out of your black tank and what's coming out of your gray tank. Why do you need to see what's coming out of your black tank? Not because it's really cool, but because if you have a black tank flusher, an integrated black tank flush, or you use the wand that you stick down the toilet, which some of those, I used to use one of those. This one has an integrated black tank flusher. You need to be able to see when it's clear and when the tank is clean. That's why it's very important to have a section of clear pipe on here. Now I have another little section of 45-degree pipe, which 45-degree angles this down. That helps a ton rather than just having it connected straight. and then you have to use the hose to kind of get your angle straight. So a little 45-degree section up there and a straight section of clear here, and you can see everything that's coming out of your pipes. You'll see when they're clean and clear, and that's going to keep odors down to a minimum. All right, let's check out some other stuff. Okay, here's a really good tip too. Your sink in the kitchen and your sink in the bathroom, as well as any other water outlet, is going to have, with the exception of the toilet, is going to have its own integrated P-trap, just like a residential faucet has and just like residential plumbing has. And if you look under your sink in your kitchen and look under your sink in the bathroom, you're going to notice that, hey, it looks just like my house. I got a P-trap. Well, some people like to keep their holding tanks open, especially their gray tanks, the shower tank and the galley tank, and it's perfectly okay to do that. You never ever want to leave your black tank open, but sometimes if you leave your gray tanks open, you can get sewer gases coming back this way from the septic system, or sometimes you can get gnats or flies or bugs or roaches, or worse yet, little mice and critters and rats that come up from the septic system. So one good way to do that is, and these hoses, you know, kind of accordion, one way to do that is form a little P-trap right where it comes out of your RV, and make sure that the top of this is below the bottom of your hose. And what that's going to do is that's going to store a bunch of liquid in there, and that's going to make another trap that's going to prevent everything from coming from the septic tank and getting back up this tube into your holding tanks, because the last thing you want to do is get flies in your gray or black tank and then you have to clean those out. That's going to be terrible. So here's a little trick. Make a little P-trap, and this adjusts, and you know, I can take that out and extend this if I want to, and then it's a straight run, but all I got to do is go like that. Now I have my own little main P-trap, and that's gonna help a ton. Okay, that's just a few little tips and tricks for holding tanks. One very important thing is you want to, when you get outside to your controls and your actual valves, you want to make sure that you're pulling the right valve. Mine were not labeled. I had to label those, and I had to experiment to find out which lever controlled which tank, and I actually had to label mine. And I got lucky. They're in the same orientation that they are inside. Your inside sensors hardly ever work. So, you know, you're going to have to experiment with different things on how you can tell when they're full and not. It's perfectly acceptable to leave your gray tanks open if you're parked and stationary for a while, but never ever leave your black tank open. So, there's a couple little holding tank tips and tricks and basics from your old buddy Matt. And once again, this is Matt from RV Travel TV, and I will see you on the road.